What's going on, y'all? Machiavelli Mills TV. Y'all hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. So, happy Thursday, everybody. I'm about to make a little content before I start watching some sports. So, yesterday I saw a prompt and I thought it was actually cool. I saw it on Instagram and it was actually on the Shade Room, I believe. And I'm paraphrasing, but the prompt was along the lines of what was your favorite book growing up, right? And so I'm gonna list some of my favorite books to read while I was coming up in my adolescence and early teenage years. For those who don't know, man, I always been like a scholar. Always been a scholar, man. I was a nerd. I always loved to read since I was a kid. I'm talking about every time the Scholastic Book Fair came to my school, I had my mama writing them checks to give me them Harry Potter books and give me all different type of books. And hey, nothing wrong with being I shouldn't say a nerd, but you know what I mean. Nothing wrong with being a scholar, man. It allowed me to get an academic scholarship during my undergraduate years at Mississippi Valley State University. So I'm blessed to have gone to college on a full ride academic scholarship, right? But anyway, yeah, so during my time in Chicago public school, I went to a magnet school, even though it was a Chicago public school. I went to Turner Drew Language Academy by 95th and the Dan Ryan. It was on 93rd and Princeton, right? And then I went to Morgan Park High School. And in these schools, we read a lot of different amazing books. And one of my favorite books that I read growing up was a book called Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right, right? And this book is outstanding to me. Like the themes of the book, like it talks about toxic masculinity before it became a real thing, before people really started to discuss it. It is based around a man named Okonkwo. He's in a village. He's an African man, right? He's of an Igbo clan, a fictional Igbo clan, right? Not Igbo is not fictional, but you know it's a fictional Igbo clan that they made up or town or whatever. It was a clan, I believe. And so there's a man named Okonkwo in the story, and his father was a debtor growing up. His father owed everybody money and all of that. And so in order to make up for, I guess, his father's terrible reputation, he showed, I guess, his masculinity through strength and being a powerful warrior, a powerful wrestler, etc. And he had the admiration of everybody in town. But Okonkwo was a man who beat his wives, he beat his children, and he thought that he looked at his son Nwoye funny because his son did not want to be this brute and this guy who was just all about physicality. He was into like books and all these other different type of things, literature and stuff. And so his father looked at him like he was less of a man. He wasn't a man and would beat him often because he did not show masculinity through brute strength and physicality, etc. And I remember reading that and was like, as a kid, I'm really like, and I'm understanding like, dang, this is really horrible how he's treating his son, and it caused him and his son to be distant. But at the same time, this book has a deeper, it touches all different points. It talks about European colonialism, right? How these white Christian missionaries from these European missionaries come in and strip the people of their religion, of their way of life, their culture, all of that, you know what I mean, and then replace it with Christian things. And Okonkwo is struggling like, well, why is my village, first of all, he's pushing back against it, and then some people push back with him, but majority of the people, they're not pushing against it. And he feel like he's left to fight a battle alone to push to keep to preserve his culture and his traditions. But at the same time, his son Nwoye starts being led by the European missionaries. And it also has to deal with the fact that the tension in the relationship between his father pushed him away from the traditional ideals of their clan and all that type of stuff. So it's really, really deep book. But when it tackles European colonialism, the way it does it is outstanding, right? One of my other favorite books growing up, The Giver by Lois Lowry. First of all, the book looks boring by the cover. An old man on the cover with a blown beard. I don't know, it just looked crazy. It looked dull. I read this book in like the 6th or 7th grade at Turner Drew Language Academy. Book is phenomenal. One of my favorite books ever. It talks about a young 12-year-old boy named Jonas who's selected to be, first of all, he's in a town where there's no memory of the past. Nobody has memories. Nobody has memory of the past. Nobody has emotions. They can't see color. There is no climate, no sense of equality. They can't make their own decisions. And Jonas, 12-year-old boy named Jonas, is selected to be the receiver of memory. So he's able to see things in the past, and all these different gifts are given to him by the giver, and he starts having emotion. He starts to see color, and he starts to look at his people, and the way their society is moving is like crazy and vile and inhumane. And it's just a really, really dope book. Y'all got to check it out. Another one of my favorite books is Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. I read this book in like 5th grade. It explores race relations and anti-black racism in rural Mississippi and the tales of a black family like dealing with these issues, right? Dealing with the Ku Klux Klan and all of that type of stuff. And it resonated with me. My paternal family is from the Mississippi Delta. And so deep South, grandmother in Cleveland, Mississippi, all of that, you know what I mean? And so thought about my grandmother. My grandmother left Mississippi in 1960 during the Great Migration, which is when a lot of black people left Mississippi and then moved to places like Chicago, Illinois. My grandmother got on the train to Chicago, Illinois, coming behind my grandfather, who was already, he had been set up in Chicago for a little minute. He got a job here as a carpenter, and then he sent for my grandmother and my father and my aunt and my uncles. They were small children. My dad moved to Chicago at 5 years old and all of that. You know what I mean? I thought about all the different things that my grandmother faced growing up in Mississippi. And I remember when Barack Obama became president and how my grandmother cried, right? And the way she cried the way she did because, you know, coming from where she came from, she never thought a black man would ever be president of the United States. It's just something that she couldn't fathom. You know what I mean? And my grandmother died in 2020. But when I read these books, I think about her. One of the first books that make me cry, To Kill a Mockingbird. And this book covers the injustices that black people faced during the Great Depression and Jim Crow era. It talks about a young man named Tom Robinson, who was accused of graping. Take the G off of graping. That's what he's accused of doing. I can't say the word because I don't want to get demonetized on YouTube. And he's accused of graping a young white girl by the name of Mayla Ewell, even though I think it was Atticus Finch. I believe he's the lawyer. He's a lawyer for Tom Robinson, a white guy. And while Tom is trying to while Atticus is trying to represent Tom Robinson, he's called an N-word lover. And Atticus's children discover the harsh reality of the plight of black American people, how Tom is treated, how everybody kind of knows Tom is innocent, and he's still found guilty anyway. And then Tom has his life taken from him. He's shot and unalived while trying to escape from prison. And again, the way this movie talks about the injustices that black people face and the plight of black American people is just profound to me. Another book, The Diary of Anne Frank, another book where I about shed tears. Of course, it covers the Holocaust for those who don't know. In the book, when I'm reading this book and you're seeing Anne Frank detail hiding out for 2 years in like an attic or an annex, trying not to get discovered by the Gestapo. And, eventually they do get discovered and they get sent to concentration camps, to what is called concentration camps. And at the end of the story, Anne, her mother Edith, her sister Margot, all of them lose their life. The only person that lives is the father, Otto Frank. And Otto Frank is he's handed Anne Frank's diary, and he publishes it. And the only thing I could think about was reading this book is, man, this man lived through hell and lost his entire family and is still able to move on. Like how he's still able to, I don't know how he was able to carry on with life knowing that your whole family was lost and your whole family died in heinous fashion. They got sick, but still they were subjected to horrible conditions, due to their religion, etc. You know what I mean? So that would make me feel emotional for that man. Like, your whole family is going, it's crazy. Another book that I really enjoyed was The Skin I'm In by Sharon G. Flake, which is a book that covers colorism. a topic that wasn't discussed as heavily back then when the book came out. I read this book in like 5th grade, and it was about a young black girl, dark-skinned girl, and how dark-skinned girls face colorism so heavily. And I thought about like some of my close family members, one of my cousins in particular, who talked about her struggles and being being teased for her dark skin color and all of that. And I resonated with this book because colorism hadn't been explored in literature for me at that time. You know what I mean? And it was tough being dark skinned. A dark skinned girl, a dark skinned guy, but especially dark skinned girls, when the red or light skinned girls were heavily in style at that time, you know, in the 90s and 80s, etc. You know, another book that I really enjoyed, Monster by Walter Dean Myers. I really liked another book from Walter Dean Myers called Somewhere in the Darkness. But Monster is a story about a young 16-year-old boy named Steve Harmon, who's on trial for murder. And this book explores the themes of peer pressure, the dehumanization of those in prison, teenage masculinity, and the struggles between that. And the book is written like a screenplay, right? And in the book, during the trial, Steve writes about his personal experiences that contradicts the thug label that was assigned to him by the prosecutor, right? And eventually he's found not guilty, but then his own lawyer looks at him, and when he tries to hug his lawyer, she turns away from him, right? And she starts to look at him and question if he was innocent all along. And but it doesn't, the crime does not fit the character of Steve Harmon. But when I read this book and I think about it, I think about the People versus O.J. Simpson, and how during the court case, Robert Kardashian was believing O.J. Simpson was innocent the entire time, for most of the time. And then towards the end of the trial, he started to have a revelation. He feels like, oh, my friend may have done this. He may have been guilty. And it led to Robert Kardashian and O.J. Simpson not being cool anymore. And until Robert's death, they were not friends anymore, because even in interviews, he starts to feel like he starts to feel like OJ could have done it. You know what I mean? And it's a good play on, it's a play on about people perceiving guilt and innocence and all that type of stuff, man. Really good book. Another book I really like is called Staying Fat for Sarah Burns, which talks about child abuse and friendship and explores all different type of things of friendship and people gaining popularity, so on and so forth. But yeah, Somewhere in the Darkness is another book. A young man lives with his legal guardian. His mom is deceased. His father is in prison. His father escapes prison and goes across town to spend time with his son. He finds out the father was innocent. The father ends up dying of kidney failure. But I really loved all these books I just named. Y'all check them out.